Most people don't fail at changing their life because they're lazy. They fail because they try to change everything at once. They wake up one day and declare war on who they've been for years, cutting all the food they love, forcing brutal routines, promising impossible discipline, and for a few days they feel powerful and in control. Then life shows up with stress, fatigue, family, and work, and suddenly they're right back where they started, feeling weaker than before. What if the real reason you keep failing isn't a lack of willpower, but the system you were taught to believe in? And what if the smallest action you can take today, so small it feels pointless, is actually the exact thing that could change everything? Almost everyone knows someone who has spent years fighting the same habits, promising themselves this time will be different, only to fall back again and again. Maybe it's someone trying to lose weight, quit drinking, stop procrastinating, or finally take control of their life. Or maybe that person is you. It always starts with hope, a Monday decision, a burst of motivation, a new routine, a new version of yourself that you swear you'll become, and for a short time it feels real. Then one stressful day, one bad night, or one skipped promise brings back that familiar voice saying, "See, you always fail, you're not disciplined, so what's the point?" And the cycle repeats, not because you're weak, but because you were taught to fight yourself instead of understanding yourself. There was a man named Daniel, 41 years old, weighing 138 kilos, working long hours, barely sleeping, living in quiet exhaustion, not dramatic exhaustion, but the kind that slowly erases your presence. He wasn't lazy, he worked hard, paid bills, supported his family, but he forgot himself. His days blurred together with fast food, screens, and weekends spent recovering instead of living. His body warned him with breathlessness and pain, but he ignored it, telling himself he would deal with it later. The worst part wasn't the weight, it was what disappeared. Energy, patience, presence. His kids stopped asking him to play, not because they didn't want to, but because they already knew the answer. One evening, his daughter asked him to race to the end of the street, and he said, "Maybe tomorrow," and that phrase stayed with him longer than the question. He had tried before, gyms, diets, motivation. Every attempt ended the same way, burnout and guilt, until he accepted a dangerous belief that this was just who he was. One afternoon, he bent down to tie his shoes and had to sit down to catch his breath. Not injured, just unable, and he stared at the floor, feeling empty. That night, he didn't make a dramatic promise. He simply admitted he couldn't keep living like this. A few days later, a quiet conversation changed everything. Not with a trainer or a doctor selling a plan, but with an older man who listened and asked one question. "What's the smallest thing you could do every day without failing?" Daniel laughed and said that wouldn't change anything, and the man smiled and said that's the point. He told Daniel to do one thing. Every morning, before his phone, before the rush, stand up, stretch for 10 seconds, and take one deep breath. That was it. No diet, no exercise. Daniel thought it was ridiculous, but agreed because it felt too small to resist. Day 1, he did it without thinking. Day 2, he almost forgot. Day 3, he remembered on his own. By the end of the week, something strange happened. He expected it. For the first time in years, he kept a promise to himself. That tiny act didn't change his body, it changed his identity. He was no longer someone who always quit, he was someone who followed through. A week later, he added one more thing, not because he was told to, but because he wanted to, replacing one sugary drink with water. Later, he started leaving a little food on his plate, not dieting, just stopping before being full. His mind resisted, but he waited, and the urge passed. Without realizing it, he was learning moderation, not control, but awareness. Months passed. The scale moved slowly, but his confidence returned faster. He started walking short distances, not for exercise, but for movement. One evening, his daughter joined him and started talking about school, fears, and dreams, and Daniel realized his body had been the barrier between him and his life. Holidays came, stress returned, old habits resurfaced, but this time he didn't quit. One bad day no longer erased progress, it simply required returning. Progress doesn't disappear because of imperfection, it disappears when you stop coming back. Slowly, his relationship with himself softened. He stopped trying to be perfect and focused on being consistent. The weight came off, but more importantly, his presence returned. He laughed, he played, he stayed. After a year, he didn't recognize the man in old photos, not because of the body, but because of the eyes. They were alive again. What changed his life wasn't motivation, because motivation fades. It wasn't discipline, because discipline breaks under pressure. It was identity. He stopped trying to change his life and started practicing being a different person, a person who returns, who accepts imperfection and continues anyway. Here's the truth most people never hear. The brain resists big changes because they feel like danger, but tiny changes slide under the radar. They don't trigger fear, they build trust. Trust with yourself is the foundation of all transformation. You don't need a new personality or superhuman discipline. You need a system that respects your humanity. One small action repeated daily until it becomes who you are, because when behavior becomes identity, effort disappears. Daniel didn't become a new man overnight. He became a man who showed up every day, and that changed everything. So now, let me ask you something. What is the smallest promise you could keep tomorrow? Not the impressive one, but the one that sounds almost stupid, because that's the one that works. Do it for 2 weeks and nothing else. When you prove to yourself that you can keep a promise, you won't need motivation anymore. You'll have something stronger, self-trust. Once you have that, no habit is permanent, no identity is fixed, and no past defines you. You don't change your life in a day. You change it by returning every day. Start small, stay human, keep going. That is how real change actually happens.